Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, January 19th, 2023, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Tuesday, January 10th, 2023, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the minutes.
Move we approve the minutes of Thursday, January 10th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 8.
I move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 and 3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 4 through 8.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 9, which is 5-BP-2023. This is the program design for the Wisconsin Broadband Office's administration of planning funds under a newly created program from the federal government, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or BEAD, and the State Digital Equity Planning Grant Program. So I think it's important, based on the comments that we received, to make it clear that we're not making any funding decisions today. Today's discussion is to simply give direction to the broadband office about how we think these programs should be structured and how the application instructions should go out, and talk a little bit about eligibility to ensure that the program complies with the federal law. So I wanted to make that clear because a number of comments that were filed requested funding.
It gave me some pause. I know I won't be here when we award them, but, you know, gives one some pause on their ability to read instructions.
Right, and sometimes I wonder, do they just see it pop up and, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So-
It gave me some concern.
So from the outset, we're not awarding dollars today. So if you've tuned in on YouTube to see who's getting dollars, you can change the channel. The first program that's up for discussion is the local planning grant program design. So what local planning grants envision is that proposed eligible entities would apply for these grants, and it would support planning efforts and build local capacity. What we've heard over the last couple of years from local leaders is that while there is a need for additional broadband infrastructure, local governments are taxed and they're stretched. They're stretched very thin in terms of people who have the technical know-how to be able to plan or do a feasibility study and find out what is the most cost-effective way to serve their residents. So the national, I always forget the acronym. The National Telecommunications and Information Administration, which is part of the United States Department of Commerce, is going to be the federal agency that administers these newly created programs at the federal level. And the NTIA has approved Wisconsin using $1.5 million of its planning grant budget to offer local planning grants. So every state had the ability to seek dollars to be able to award them to eligible entities within their state. We were awarded $5 million in total for the BEAD programming, and under that BEAD funding, we can utilize $1.5 million to offer local planning grants. And this is the first issue that Commission staff is seeking our input on the program components. So staff has proposed calculating grant amounts through a commission-approved formula, which would make an equal amount available to each county and tribal entity that applies. And the reason behind this is it will encourage regional cooperation and collaboration. So specifically, Commission staff propose a formula that would include a 10% increase in local planning funds awarded if applicants elect to work together within regional groups. And again, this is not meant to exclude any entity at the outset. There was some, I think, also confusion based on the comments received about the eligibility of tribes to apply and whether or not the Great Lakes Intertribal Council speaks on behalf of the tribes. That was not the purpose of mentioning the Great Lakes Intertribal Council in this memo. It was merely to point to the Great Lakes Intertribal Council as an example of a regional economic development organization that could participate and be eligible. So the purpose is to include all counties and eligible tribes, and then those entities would submit an application to us, and we will take up those applications at a later date. So for this first issue, I was okay with what staff proposed, that formula allocation, and I would be okay with the way that they've laid it out in our memo. So I was at alternative 1. Commissioner Nowak.
Yeah, there is no perfect way to disperse these dollars. And, you know, the counties actually that might need, you know, if we did it based on population, most of it would go to just a handful, if not 1 or 2 counties. And that doesn't seem fair because the inverse is true about their availability of broadband. So, and this is just one of the tools that is helpful. This isn't going to be the end-all to solve. And so I don't have I'm not going to make any changes to what staff proposed because I think we have to start, get it out there, and really hopefully that they do work together. We've seen that before. And as you mentioned, we didn't mean to, apparently there's some internal issues with the Great Lakes, and we meant just that was an example.
Right, right.
And the tribes should, you know, I hope that the counties work with the tribes and vice versa. I mean, they're within a county, and, you know, we should be inclusive about that. So I hope that there's coordination there, and everyone should be working together on this. So, and, you know, the money, if not every county wants it, that's fine. You know, we don't have to spend the 1.5 million because every dollar that we don't spend here can go back into the other part of the fund, which I think is, you know, there's always a tension, right, between we want to spend the money accurately, but we don't want to spend too much. What's the right amount to plan to spend it accurately? Let's just not spend it for the sake of, well, we have that allotment. If it's going to be useful, it should be done. So I will join you at alternative 1.
Okay. Commissioner Huebner?
Yep, I'm at alternative 1 too. I thought the approach here, and kind of as described by staff and in my briefing, was, you know, this is the planning, and then we've got implementation. So we've got a long haul with a lot of work to come. And so engaging the local governments and the tribes and putting some money out there for them to fly to the honey and really get engaged on this, I think is a good approach, as opposed to some other states are kind of doing a consultant approach where they're doing local engagement, but the state hires a consultant. I think this is a much more inclusive way to do it. So I would be I'll support it.
Okay. All right, the next piece is workforce planning, and this is $100,000. And again, I think there was some confusion. So as part of our award from the federal government, we're required to prepare a plan to ensure that there's a workforce trained and available to get the infrastructure in the ground. And that's something I think that we've all heard, right, is that we want to make sure that if we're deploying dollars, that there are able people out there who have the technical expertise to be able to actually complete these projects. So part of the funding is $100,000 to go towards workforce planning. And again, the intent here, when commission staff in their memo talks about state entities, that's not limited to the Department of Workforce Development. It means entities that are located within the state of Wisconsin. So who better to understand the sort of landscape of our workforce better than a Wisconsin-based entity? And commission staff proposes that there be no maximum, because it could be that there is one entity that that comes to the fore, that has the ability and the contacts and the network to put together a plan for the entire state. It's also possible that there are, more than one entity that steps forward. So I was okay with what was presented to us as it relates to the workforce planning grant. Commissioner Nowak?
I was too, and I just wanted to make some comments on it. One, it should go to an entity, as it says here, and it'll put in the grant application with experience in this area. And I just really want the commission to be mindful of working with entities that have a good track record in the state. When you see lots of influx of dollars like we are seeing in this, and we've seen it in other, when the federal government hands down lots of money, new entities pop up and they want to become consultants and do this and that. And I think it's just, again, spend it like it's your own money. You're going to give it to someone where you know that they've done this and have a good track record and have a history of being good stewards of federal dollars and our tax dollars. I'm okay with leaving it as a maximum. We could give it all to one, just to give flexibility, but, there's risk in that too, for sure. And so I just raised that as, I was hesitant at first, but I'll leave it there for flexibility purposes. But it might be best too, just given the different geography of our state, that we have more than one recipient with that. But with that, I'll join you at that alternative.
Okay. Commissioner Hebner?
Yep, I'm also at alternative one. Appreciate the clarification from both of you. I saw it the same way, that it needs to be entities operating in the state, which could include tribes. And I'll just say something that, again, I got from my briefing is, this work is going to be happening all over the place, every state, and it's federal funding. But we have an opportunity here with workforce to skill and train Wisconsinites to do the work here in Wisconsin. So I think it's a good economic development opportunity, and the types of entities from tech colleges, tribes, industry groups, labor organizations, there's a big opportunity. So hopefully this planning grant helps lay out those pathways for Wisconsin to really benefit.
Yeah, and I think we have an opportunity to be creative. I know at one of the summits that I attended, the representative from AARP talked about, there's a silver tsunami coming in terms of impending retirements of a lot of baby boomers, and there's still a lot of capacity to be able to work and to do meaningful work. And so to your point, Commissioner Hebner, I do think it's an opportunity to really maybe reskill and redeploy Wisconsin residents in this workforce planning. Okay, the next one is, I feel like I skipped one. Did I skip one?
No, they just combined the one alternative. I think we're on page 20, the DE awards.
Oh, yeah.
We have one on 19 too, right? Or maybe my pages are wrong.
Okay, we just did work for, okay, now we're to eligible applicants.
Oh, yeah. For
Right?
the DE awards.
Yeah, okay.
DE awards.
All right, so now this is for digital equity. And commission staff proposed that for purposes of the digital equity outreach grants, and under the federal guidance of the Infrastructure Act, that these be defined as any entities that serve a covered population, as defined by the Notice of Funding Opportunity. And these would exclude government entities from eligibility. And so commission staff believes that it would be appropriate to differentiate between eligible applicant pools for the BEAD planning process and for the digital equity planning grants. Again, I think it's wise to be able to differentiate, because to your point, Commissioner Nowak, when you see buckets of dollars come in, you also see a proliferation of so-called experts in how to deploy those dollars. And so I think for the purposes of the DE outreach grants, that what commission staff has put forward is reasonable. And I would go with alternative 1.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with their proposal here. I just want to make a comment more on the digital equity portion of this, because what struck me, and these are terms that are, depending on where you go, what underrepresented is. But if you look, based on what the federal guidelines are, like 80% of our state population falls into an underrepresented category, which just strikes me as odd. Because I think, and that's part of the function of how this bill probably got passed, and every group wanted something in there. But we dilute the need, and we really, I think, harm those that need it most when you start adding so many entities to the underrepresented category. So we can't change that. I just was, hope there's more focus on the ones that have a true lack versus, because now we're moving the goalpost too on what is necessary. It's not just fiber to the home, it's what type of device do you now have and what type of, it's like, and part of that's the evolution of the technology, but at some point we have to say, what is the role of government, at least I do, to say, where do we stop and just, and then just let the private sector take over. But it's, the money that was passed is quite encompassing, and I think, it's there, but I just had a concern. It just struck me odd that 80% under this bucket is underrepresented. I struggled with that a bit, but we have to, go by the guidelines that the federal government's handed down, and, hopefully this planning can help target those in need.
Yep. And I think you're right. I mean, I think when you look at the definition of covered populations, it does seem to illustrate that there were a lot of people sitting at the table who had to agree to get this done. So just for purposes of clarity, what we're talking about and why Wisconsin is at that 80% is the list of covered populations include individuals who live in households with incomes below 150% of the federal poverty level, aging individuals, which I would argue we're all aging, at least we should hope to be aging.
But it's all subjective. Some of it's subjective. So.
Incarcerated individuals, except those in federal correction facilities, veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with a language barrier, including English learners and those with low levels of literacy, members of racial or ethnic minority groups, and individuals who primarily reside in a rural area. So yes, when you take all of those groups and you combine them, it does add up to a large percentage of Wisconsin. Commissioner Huebner?
Yep, I'm at alternative 1 on this. And I think it's, this will exclude the government entities. So the first piece is going to county governments and tribal governments. This is going to go to non-government entities. So we're kind of creating the structure where a lot of the experts and the on-the-ground folks that are going to have to implement this are going to be engaged at this point. And I think that that's good, because as we know, there's going to be a lot of money coming through this bill to hopefully cover almost everybody in the state of Wisconsin. So getting everybody at the table to figure out how to do it right, that this is exactly why we have planning grants. So I'm at alt 1.
Okay. The final decision we have relates to the maximum grant subaward. So commission staff are proposing that the digital equity outreach grant maximum subaward are $50,000 to any one applicant and $100,000 to a consortium of 2 or more entities. And this largely mirrors, this sort of tiered approach, mirrors what we agreed to related to the 2022 Energy Innovation Grant Program design. But I think what we've seen and what we've heard is when it comes to these types of subawards that the maximum amount can work as a deterrent to having entities work together, because they look at it and they say, well, there's really no bigger bang for our buck if we get, sure, 2 or more, 50 plus 50 equals 100. But if you're talking about an entity from north central part of the state and the western and the eastern and southeastern and central, it quickly, I think, becomes less attractive to have that type of collaboration. So I was actually in favor of foregoing a maximum grant subaward, because I don't want to limit the ability to have a comprehensive statewide approach. And that doesn't mean, again, we're not making any decisions right now about what or whether to fund. We're making decisions about how to go forward with the application instructions. So for this one, I was at Alt 3, and I would not establish a maximum. I would leave it open and see kind of what comes out of that. So I'm at Alt 3.
So you would allow one entity to get the whole 335, for example?
I would,
If that were.
if that were the best one.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to be, I was fine with no max on the other. I just would caution, I guess, for flexibility. I would only leave it that way. I suspect there will be several coming in. Just, I could see one for the northwest or east part of the state, and then the southwest. So, but I can join you there. I mean, it's hopefully it's split up a little more, but it just allows some flexibility that maybe one needs 100 and the consortium needs 150
Right.
versus, so that's fine.
Okay. Commissioner Huebner?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was at Alt 1 here. I thought it was fine to have the maximums and, again, kind of spread it out. So if you're both at Alt 3, I'll stay at Alt 1.
Okay.
Okay.
And I would just encourage, too, the ones that come in to have some type of, that this probably won't cover it all, but to see a nice match in there and, have some skin in the game as well. I think that's very important. So, okay, docket 5 BP 2023, I move that we approve the program design for Wisconsin Broadband's Office Administration of Planning funds under the BEAD and DE grant program pursuant to our discussion today.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that concludes our official business for today. There's no meeting next week, so the next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, February 2nd, 2023 at 10:30 a.m.
Move we stand adjourned until Thursday, February 2nd, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.